Hi, everyone. It's Emil. It's Emil Guillermo. Emil Amok to you. Start of the week, a Monday. The Queen has been put to rest. Did you get up early? I have to admit, I got up early. I'm on the West Coast, so it was super early for me. I didn't watch the whole thing. I mean, I didn't get up at 3 o'clock. I got up more like 4:30 to catch most of the long walk and the ceremony, because look, I'm like everyone else. I like the news. I'm hooked on that stuff. I'm watching it. But I hope you're thinking about other things. I mean, I was actually thinking about my friend Henry. And, since the Queen's death, I took to criticizing the repressive colonial misdeeds of the British Empire just to balance out the steady stream of adulation. So when you hear someone say Queen, you automatically, you remember, you don't forget Kenya or Kowloon or Burma. And it was in all things royal. The Queen may have been nice to her corgi dogs, but can you tell me why she insisted her guardsmen wear those big black hats from real bearskin? A bearskin hat may be a good thing for the human ego. But what about the bears? I mean, those hats are unique and visible examples of royal exploitation. You couldn't miss them if you're watching the Monday funeral procession, and I was this morning. So I'll get into that. I'll get into what I was thinking about when I was watching that morning funeral procession. Of course, it's later in the day now. I admit to being a little tired because I was also writing at the time. I was writing my piece that's in the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund site, ALDEF, aaldef.org/blog. So I'll read from that. But just as I was coming on, don't you know, we're going to get some kind of breaking news. And there is. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the Queen. I'm going to talk about my friend, Hyphen Free Henry. I'm going to talk about Joe Biden on 60 Minutes because that was on last night. I'm going to talk about some NFL news. I'm going to talk about, look, I'm a 49er fan. So I'm going to talk about Trrey Lance and how I view Trrey Lance, because it was almost like a foregone conclusion that he would ultimately get hurt and that Jimmy Garoppolo would come in. So all that coming up today on this Emil Amok's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable, according to me. And, we do this thing Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, because as I said, by then, usually all the bad stuff has happened. We're live on amok.com, on YouTube, on the Emil Guillermo channel there, on Facebook at facebook.com or fb.com, on Facebook Watch, Facebook Live, or just go to facebook.com/emilguillermo.media. See all the shows live and all the shows recorded right there. So just as I was coming on, I make a routine check. Here's the headline. Remember the show Serial? Remember Adnan Syed, who was convicted? Well, this afternoon, the judge vacated the murder conviction of Adnan Syed of Serial fame. And the decision could free Syed, who's 41. He'd been serving a life sentence for the 1999 murder of his high school classmate, Hyphen Lee. Her family sought unsuccessfully to postpone the hearing. And I mentioned it. It was a Wall Street Journal exclusive last week, picked up by everyone today, the New York Times, the Post. And it's important because we're dealing with it's a cultural phenomenon, right? Because of Serial and the people involved. We have 2 Asian American kids, one of whom was convicted, and now that conviction has been vacated. What does it mean? Well, a judge in Baltimore overturned the murder conviction of Syed on Monday, a decision that could set Syed free after 23 years behind bars. And remember, it was first chronicled in that podcast Serial, public radio podcast that kind of introduced all of podcasting, right, to the public, done by a reporter who was talking about her obsession with the case and then her questioning of people involved after the fact, putting it all together, trying to go back over this case. Public was obsessed. People didn't know what would happen. And then, of course, Syed was found guilty. Prosecutors now, with this vacated conviction today, have yet to decide if they will seek a new trial or drop the charges against Syed. They said that an investigation had pointed to two possible alternative suspects, although those individuals have not been named publicly or charged. So, as you'll recall, Syed, 41, serving a life sentence for the strangulation of his high school classmate and one-time girlfriend, Hyphen, whose body was found buried in a park in Baltimore County in 1999. Syed was just 17 at the time, had steadfastly maintained his innocence, and questions about whether he'd received a fair trial was part of the focus of Serial when it debuted in 2014. It also began the whole true crime. Well, true crime was around before, but this, you see how the sparks, 2014, now where we are now. And true crime certainly is a thing in the podcast world. 12 episodes of the case against Mr. Syed, including peculiarities of his lawyer, who agreed to be disbarred amid complaints of wrongdoing in 2001, and he ultimately died in 2004. But it wasn't until this month that prosecutors recommended that his conviction be vacated and that he be granted a new trial because they said, quote, the state no longer has confidence in the integrity of the conviction. This is from the New York Times piece that just broke within the hour. In a motion filed in Baltimore City Court last Wednesday, prosecutors said that a nearly year-long investigation conducted with Mr. Syed's lawyer had uncovered information pointing to the possible involvement of two alternative suspects who might have failed to disclose to Mr. Syed's lawyers in violation of their legal duty. That's significant. The investigation also identified significant reliability issues regarding the most critical pieces of evidence used to convict Mr. Syed, including cell phone tower data. Now, Ms. Lee's family, of course, were concerned that prosecutors had not given them adequate notice about the move to vacate the conviction. And this is where you get to be on both sides, right? You can see from Syed's point, hey, if there's information here, the conviction should be overturned. Well, wait a minute. An Asian American victim was involved. Hyphen Lee and her family said, hey, we weren't told about this. Now, the judge, Melissa Finn of Baltimore City Circuit, rejected the request to put off the decision. And as the court took a recess, Steve Kelly, the family's lawyer, scrambled to call Ms. Lee's brother, young Lee, who was at work, to ask him to join the hearing via Zoom. I suppose they thought maybe they would get the postponement. And this is what Lee said. And this is touching. It's real. This is not a podcast for me. Mr. Lee, the brother, young Lee, said, voice wavering, when he addressed the court about 45 minutes later on Zoom. This is real life, a never-ending nightmare for 20 plus years. He said he felt blindsided and betrayed by the motion to vacate and frustrated with the many turns in the case over the last 2 decades. Whenever I think it's over and it's ended, it always come back, Mr. Lee said, adding, it's killing me and killing my mother. I mean, put yourself in their shoes. I mean, I remember listening to Serial going back and forth. It was a nun guilty. I mean, a couple of times I thought, no, it couldn't be him. I remember this was the conversation back in 2014 when Serial came out. Oh, he couldn't be guilty. No, he's innocent. He says he's innocent. And then circumstantial evidence suggested, well, maybe not. And then what about Hyphen Lee? I lived in the Maryland, D.C. area. Well, actually, I left it in 95, but the murder was in 99. I kind of knew how that area was developing, how there were a lot of immigrants, Asian immigrants, how they were getting along, and how they were, I kind of knew the area. So I took special interest when Serial ran. But I have to admit, just like Mr. Lee, this whole story took me for a loop. Like, I'm done with Serial, right? I mean, Adnan did it. He's in prison. But now it looks like the judge has vacated the murder conviction for the 1999 murder. Adnan has spent 23 years behind bars. You see pictures of him. He's got a beard. He's heavier. He's older. He's 41 now. He's not a teenager. Things are different. The facts are different. What should happen to Adnan Syed? And so we will see what the prosecution says, because the prosecution can say, let's round up the facts for a new case, for a new trial. Or if prosecutors recommended that the conviction be vacated because the state no longer has confidence in the integrity of the conviction, do they let Adnan Syed go free? He's a free man if the state no longer has confidence in the conviction. What about the people seeking justice, the victim side? The real killer's still out there? Are they going to go after them? These are all questions. This is why this is a developing story. But it likely will be talked about in the immediate future, just because Serial was a popular podcast and people remember Adnan Syed. They remember Hyphen Lee. There were sides, right? People took sides. Who did you believe? And now we know the state didn't have some bits of evidence that would have given him greater confidence in the conviction, because today they expressed to the judge they had no confidence in the conviction, and the judge went ahead and vacated that conviction of Adnan Syed today, Monday, the 19th of September, 2022. So we'll follow it. We'll look for it. But it makes you think, because you remember where you were when you heard Serial 8 years ago. You can still hear it. I mean, it's still available wherever you podcast. But it shows you how difficult it is to prove a case. And then when you get a conviction, things have to line up just right. You have to convince the jury. Just like if you're not guilty, if you're found not guilty, just how incredible that is in terms of proving it, proving your innocence. And in Adnan Syed's case, he wasn't able to prove it till later. And what do they say? They said they've got better techniques in terms of evaluating cell phone data, cell phone tower data. They have better techniques in terms of evaluating DNA. They have a sense that two possible alternative individuals that should have been considered weren't considered. This is why every case, no matter how slam dunky it appears, is no slam dunk, and shows what a thin thread sometimes. You know, how justice hangs on this thin thread. And how a juror sees it, or in this case, how a judge sees it. Makes all the difference. Anyway, we'll follow it. We'll follow it. We'll follow it. It's our community, right? We'll follow it. 2 Asian Americans involved. National interest in justice. We'll keep our eyes peeled. So now back to today. So I'm waking up early. I'm watching the Queen. You see these big bearskin hats. You know, really, you couldn't miss them, right? They were all over. And a bearskin hat may be good for the human ego. But what about the bears? Right? I mean, the Queen may have been nice to her corgi dogs, but she has been asked to switch the guardsmen's hats from the bearskin to synthetic. And they could easily. But she didn't. Maybe that's on Charles now. Anyway, couldn't miss the hats. I wouldn't have bothered to watch. But then my friend Henry Fuhrmann died last week from esophageal cancer. He was just 65. And that put me in a somber mood. I mean, look, what did the Queen ever do for us? You know, compared to her, Henry was a king, or deserved to be. Henry Fuhrmann liberated us from our hyphens. And Henry knew all about us and our hyphens very well. He was an Asian American, son of a German-Danish Navy corpsman. I know about corpsmen. They're like the medics. They're the ones who go into the battle and tend to the wounded. They care. The corpsmen care. They usually go out with the Marines, right? Go out into combat. I know some corpsmen. They are tough dudes and dudettes. There are women corpsmen. So, son of a German-Danish Navy corpsman and a Japanese mother, born on a U.S. hospital ship in Japan. How's that for a story? That story alone, indicative of probably all the hyphens in his life. He knew why they should be terminated or eliminated. By deleting the hyphen, deleting the hyphen would take more than a keystroke. You see, Henry was a copy editor who retired in 2015 as an assistant managing editor at the LA Times. He was my LA Asian American Journalists Association buddy, AAJA, whom I would see at professional events. We'd retweet each other from afar. I liked Henry. Henry Fuhrmann had that, the name Fuhrmann. Made me think of someone in the OJ trial. But he was Asian American. You could see it. Look, I gave my wife gave birth to 3 Hoppas. You can tell the halves. Unmistakable. And there was Henry. Henry was German, Danish, Japanese, American. No hyphen necessary. Because that was Henry's passion, the demon hyphen. He despised what it did to us. He wanted to expose it for what it was and get rid of its use. In that simple dash, the parallel line that posed as a connector. Oh, you're no connector. Henry saw a dividing line, an othering tool that did us more harm than good. Asian hyphen American? No. Nope, Henry said. Just right, Asian American. Or Filipino American, or Chinese American, or African American, or Mexican American. Hyphen? I ain't got to show you no stinking hyphen. Hey, a grammatical prosthetic is all it was. That didn't really help matters. It made us less than. And Henry made his case professionally to journalism's high court of wordsmithing, the keepers of the Associated Press style book known as AP Style. In an essay Henry wrote in 2018, he cited the writer Maxine Hong Kingston, who expressed how she felt being called Chinese American in her 1982 piece, Cultural Misreadings by American Reviewers. I have been thinking that we ought to leave out the hyphen in Chinese American because the hyphen gives the word on either side equal weight, as if linking 2 nouns, wrote Hong Kingston. Without the hyphen, Chinese is an adjective and American a noun. A Chinese American is a type of American. And that is significant. We're a type of American. We're not Chinese American, 2 equal things. I mean, how many times have people looked at the hyphen and paid no mind at what it actually was doing? That innocent looking stripe, that bar. Was it linking 2 nouns that were separate and perhaps equal at times? According to whom? Without the hyphen, wouldn't we just be, as Hong Kingston described, a type of American, emphasis on American? From that, Henry made these recommendations on writing about race. This is kind of important. Guidelines, right? He said, start by asking whether reference to race or ethnicity are essential to the story. If such details are not germane, then omit them. Remember that the common labels are, by definition, broad, even blunt. It's better to be more specific. A Taiwanese, no hyphen American. An immigrant from Guatemala. A native of Colombia who identifies as black. He capitalized the B, black. That's not often the case. Refer to people by the terms they choose. That was kind of the key. How do you say it? I respect you. At the LA Times, that meant Asian American supplanting Oriental. African American, no hyphen, eventually joined black, small b in the style book. But one day, Henry said, he imagined maybe considering replacing black, small b, with black, capital B. I mean, these are the wordsmithing kind of things that editors are concerned about. They are standard bearers of how we write, how we look at a written word in a newspaper or in written media, AP style. And he went to the top, and a year later, AP eliminated the hyphen in the word Asian American and in reference to people of color, and mentioned Henry's essay as the reason. In 2021, the New York Times changed its usage because every media organization can adopt their own style books. I mean, you'll still see the hyphen used. It's just used less often. But while the hyphen may or may not be there, surely the term Oriental has been eliminated from use. Describe rugs, of course, but not people. Usually, editors act as conservative gatekeepers of so-called standards. They're not exactly my favorite people, but Henry was a freedom fighter for a changing language in a changing world. You know, with Henry, it was always a matter of clarity. His latest crusade, were Japanese Americans placed in internment camps? Ah, that was the question. Was what happened to them internment, or were they more truthfully incarcerated? More and more are saying the truth. Incarceration. That was Henry's doing as well. You know, it shouldn't be hard to tell the truth in mainstream journalism. But look at how journalists too often pull their punches. Play it conservative, play it safe, like in calling Trump a liar, no matter how many thousands of misleading statements or outright lies he told during his administration, according to the Washington Post, or a racist based on his actions toward people of color, or a fascist. I mean, fascist? The F word? I mean, is a one-armed salute like we saw in Ohio over the weekend at a Trump rally anything but an indicator of at least nouveau fascism in America? Or look how cautious people are about calling Florida Governor Ron DeSantis a racist for his inhumane and possibly illegal relocation of immigrants to Martha's Vineyard. From the start, if you listen to the show, you know I called it a form of human trafficking. Why sugarcoat it? That's why I mourn Henry's passing. He was against editing the truth. He's the reason you are not an Asian hyphen American, but an Asian American. If words matter, if the truth matters, remember Henry Fuhrmann, the man who unchained us from the hyphen and liberated us all. So remember Henry. I mean, I'll tell you, it was a shock to find out. I told you I found out last week. I saw a tweet. AAJA, the Asian American Journalists Association, knew he was sick and said, oh, they're going to give him a Lifetime Achievement Award. And the day they gave it, it was too late. But I didn't read that deeply into the story. I didn't realize he died until I read Richard Prince's journalisms. And then I found out that Richard had gotten to Henry last July when I decided not to go to the Asian American Journalists Convention, which I now regret. I didn't go because of COVID. And Richard ended up asking Henry to cover it for his journalism's blog. And it wasn't until some more sleuthing in social media that anyone really knew or understand how serious Henry's illness was. It was Randall Yip at ASAM News who cited a Facebook post from one of Henry's family members that it was esophageal cancer. It's so sad. I mean, it's hard enough when you're looking at the news and you're trying to figure out ethnicity, if you're writing ethnic centric, you know, publications or for ethnocentric publications or media, say, is that guy Asian? Is that guy Filipino? Is that, you know, because a lot of times they just leave out that fact. It's important though. But more important than anything else was the hyphen. The hyphen. The presence of the hyphen set us apart. And really, it was a less than, a minus sign, something that should have been extracted by a good editor. And Henry Fuhrmann was not just a good copy editor, but a great one. He fought for the truth. He was kind. He was not perfect. He made some mistakes. I mean, look, copy editing is like one of the most thankless jobs at a newspaper. But that's the basis of what you say is, you know, on first blush, the accuracy and the truthfulness of any written medium. I mean, if they can't spell the name, if they say something wrong, it's a copy editor. Copy editors are that safety net. I didn't really appreciate them until I started doing more writing, as opposed to talking, writing, as opposed to broadcast, as opposed to TV and radio. But boy, when I went to newspapers, I started doing something for print. You love your copy editors, the good ones. They're worth their weight in gold. They would excise that and say cliche, but who cares? It applies in this case. Talking about Henry Fuhrmann. Thinking about you, Henry. Thanks for all you did for us. So we switch gears. Talk about Joe Biden made the news. He was late. Some people making a big deal about, they had to sit him in the back from all the other world leaders, but he was late. So I guess he didn't sit up close. I mean, he was like 14 rows back. I would say that's no big deal. But he was flying in and made a big splash Sunday night after football made a big splash. We'll talk about football and sports toward the end. But if you saw the 60 Minutes interview with Scott Pelley, I would have to say I thought Biden did a good job, although Biden did say some things that will be considered, as Scott Pelley put it, controversial. I thought basically he answered all the questions about the hard stuff, inflation, fairly well. Look, some prices are coming down. It's not exploding. We're living with the problem. We're going to get better. And we're creating more jobs. I thought Biden was very good handling the inflation question, because that is the number one question. People are looking at they're looking at their grocery bills. They're looking at their gas bills. I was surprised. I keep hearing that gas is like $3.91 or something. Or I'm thinking that's the price, but not in California. Of course, in California, I paid, I think, $5.51 over the weekend for a gallon of gas. I'm feeling it, and we're paying. I think Biden's on track. He talks about job creation. He talks about cutting the debt. Can't be as concerned with the stock market because that's not in our control. But you have money managers and stock manipulators. You know, they do what they will. And I'm just saying, you can't react to the day. Hang tight. Keep your spending modest. Save. Pay off debt. I mean, those are some basic rules. If you don't have money, that's when that's when it hurts, because the erosion has already begun, right? You have less of less, and you're not feeling good. Spend less, try to make do. I think all you can do right now is trust the government to do what it can. Because I'll tell you, the Republicans would not be in a better position. Not than Biden. What would they do? Cut the debt? Cut taxes? That wouldn't affect you, but would affect the rich and not the middle class? That's why I trust Biden on inflation and the financials. He's not just taking care of the 1%. He used that term a lot. Trying to build the middle class, trying to build America from the middle out to impact or to benefit everyone. That's why I would prefer his strategy to fighting inflation than the Republicans. But where Biden comes into some trouble is when he talks about the pandemic. Look, I'll admit, I was out there with people this weekend. I had been watching television, the sporting events. Okay, sure, they're outside. I'm watching people doing their thing. And Biden was with Scott Pelley at the Detroit Motor Show, where Biden was announcing the plan of his to open up charging stations throughout the country. That kind of investment, that's a good thing. And Pelley says, first Detroit car show in 3 years. This is something. We're back. Pandemic's over. And Joe Biden said, yeah, the pandemic's over. If you want to hear him exactly, this is what he said. The question was, if the pandemic over?
Pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it. But the pandemic is over. If you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it.
So that is probably the biggest statement that he made on 60 Minutes that I have a quarrel with, because you know the pandemic isn't over. I mean, you look at the numbers. On this show, I keep talking about how many people die each day. I mean, it's anywhere from 350 to 400. It varies. On average, about 350 a day. This is throughout the nation, which, as I like to point out, is the equivalent of 2.5 737s going down. If a Southwest airliner went down, if 2 Southwest airliners go down in one day, that would be cause for alarm. Great alarm. But here, 350 to 375 deaths a day, no one wants to be alarmed, because everyone is so optimistic. They want the pandemic to be over. So I'm a little critical there of Joe Biden, because I don't think it's over. Although, like I said, this weekend I was out. I went to a restaurant, ate indoors. Hey, look, it was my anniversary. Well, at least I'm with my bride, and if we get it, we'll get it together. COVID. I don't think we got COVID, but we got a great view of the Golden Gate Bridge and a great vegan meal. Hopefully no COVID. I guess we'll have to test. But when I watched Biden say that, on Sunday, I just thought, well, okay, great. But what really is next? The CDC has been they haven't been neutered, but they've realized that they've had some miscommunications. And so now we have a new vaccine coming up. A friend of mine told me this weekend, oh, I'm going to get the vaccine again. And I think that's great. But I find out when I dig in to the vaccine that this new vaccine hasn't been clinically trialed. So we don't know. Maybe instead of rushing into this new vaccine, we should wait a little bit. Mind you, this 5th vaccine is different from the 4th vaccine, which I went ahead and got in June, but people were telling me, oh, if you got the 4th booster, that doesn't last as long. June, July, August, September, it's probably not working now. So I'm not sure about rushing into the 5th booster until maybe 1,000 people have had it and they see what kind of impacts it's had on people's health. But keep in mind that the numbers of people who are dying is still lower than at the peak in January when 2,500 people were dying on a daily basis. It's now down to like 500 or less. And most of the people dying are older people, unvaccinated. So try to keep as current as you can. But I think as opposed to totally thinking the pandemic is over, I continue to mask up. I don't mind. I don't mind if I'm the only one. And increasingly, my wife and I are the only ones. I don't mind. I don't have to shave. No, I'll still shave. I don't have much to shave, you can see. But that's the one thing I don't agree on with Joe Biden. I don't think the pandemic is over. I think the pandemic is normalizing. But this is my advice, don't let your guard down. I mean, the other things that Joe Biden said to 60 Minutes were kind of, well, interesting. I don't think it's going to be, they're news. It's news when he says, when he's a little coy about running again. He says he doesn't want to say outright because he doesn't want to trigger off things that he has to do under election laws, which may or may not be true, but that's what he said. And, he's going to take his time and evaluate, and things change. And a lot of people are saying he's too old. And that was the other thing that came up. I like the way he defended himself. Look, try to keep up with my schedule. Try to keep up with, I can't. I'm younger than he is. But I know it's difficult to have that kind of public schedule. Sometimes I wonder how he does it. And instead of the ridicule, the ageism that some Republicans are showing by ridiculing him, I think we all should cut him some slack. I mean, he's older, but he's not ineffective. He's not incompetent. He's just older. And consider maybe wiser. I just think Joe Biden deserves a lot of benefit of the doubt at this point. Will he run again? Let's not push him. Let's make him say he's not being blunt or as candid as like, oh yeah, definitely I am. A lot of conditionals in the past, like if I run, or you'll say, like he'd say, if I run, Kamala Harris is my vice president. He says that in the last couple months. Things change. We don't know. Let's see. Let's wait and see. For Asian Americans, I thought the interesting thing he said was when he talked about Taiwan. Would the U.S. defend Taiwan? And the president said, look, we made agreements with China years ago. We're going to stick to those agreements. Then he was asked, well, are you going to defend Taiwan? He said, yes. Now, that's different, apparently, 60 Minutes is saying. And they asked the White House if anything changed in White House policy. And the White House said no. So there's a little semi-disconnect. Is Biden's willingness to defend Taiwan a change in policy? I don't think any more a change than Nancy Pelosi, what she was saying when she visited Taiwan. But this is what happens. Your commander-in-chief, reporters looking to play gotcha games, although I thought 60 Minutes was fair. Still, I have no reason to distrust the president or to think ill of him for what he said on Taiwan. I think if something happened to Taiwan, the U.S. would be there to support it. And I think that is making China think about doing anything other than leaving things status quo, at least for now. So that was Joe Biden on Sunday, which was, I didn't really want to listen. Well, I wanted to see what he said when I heard a headline. I saw a headline about what he said about the pandemic. But really, Sunday's for football, right? I mean, I know some people aren't sports folks. I happen to be a sports guy. I mean, I like sports, and I've been missing football. And I'm glad that we're now in week 2. I'm a 49er fan, and it was so strange yesterday because they were playing at home, the 49ers, and they started their second-year quarterback. They're the guy who they said, this is the future. We're going to give up all these draft picks. He's our guy, Trrey Lance. Trrey Lance is a big, strapping kid, but he's not that good right now. But they demoted Jimmy Garoppolo, the quarterback who took him to a championship game and to the Super Bowl a couple years back. They demoted Garoppolo, tried to get rid of him, couldn't get rid of him. Garoppolo ends up as the expensive backup. Now it looks like a wise thing. But I will say this. I was rooting for Trrey Lance and wanted to see him to do something yesterday. But somehow I knew things were not going to work out for him. I mean, not when you call running plays on second down several times before the ill-fated play call that sent Trrey Lance on another running play where he gets pounded to the ground and buried by 2 large defensive players, breaks his ankle, is out for the season. Look, people will say it's a rough game. They expect injuries. But if the 49ers really believed in Trrey Lance, they would have done more things to make sure he wasn't clobbered in the first quarter. No one's going to say it. It's hard to prove. It's hard to say that they set him up. But in many ways, what do you expect? You send a quarterback into the line, holding the ball, knowing he's going to get creamed by linebackers and linemen. That's football, right? Well, yeah, that's football. But it's not football if you are looking to protect your valued asset. In some ways, this was sort of the preordained suicidal mission of Trrey Lance. Give him the ball. Let's see if he survives. He broke his ankle. Out for the season. First quarter. In comes Jimmy Garoppolo. Backup. Multi-million-dollar backup quarterback. Comes in, leads the 49ers to a touchdown. Everyone explodes with joy. The 49ers are back. Oh, they've got the quarterback that works. The quarterback who makes their offense looks good. Who makes their coach look good. And the 49ers win the game. Wasn't close. Garoppolo's starter. You know, the rap on Garoppolo is he gets hurt all the time. So, you know, getting hurt is part of this. I mean, Garoppolo had shoulder surgery in the offseason. Didn't look like it when he was throwing the ball yesterday. So, like I said, you can't prove that they set up Trrey Lance, but in some ways, it's sort of the hard-ass way to look at it. But if they were going to have Trrey Lance start and be the quarterback, they were going to use him in the way that shows his strengths. And if he's a runner, they'll let him run and they'll let him get creamed. I mean, there's no sliding into the big defensive tackle. There's no, getting your yardage and then falling down easily, soft landing. Just didn't. I mean, he was a running back and he went head on and got creamed. I'm sorry for Trrey Lance. I was rooting for him, but even when he was well, it just indicated that something was wrong, that he wasn't quite right. And, I mean, that he wasn't ready. So I think the 49ers they sacrificed Trrey Lance. Let the kid run. Let's see what he can do. And he got hurt. And no one is able to prove, or no one will say that, oh, well, they set him up. Now, I'll say that. I say that because that's what it looks like to me. Everyone else will say, that's football. People get hurt. And now the 49ers have Jimmy Garoppolo at the helm, the quarterback no one wanted. And they look like they can start winning for real again. It's strange. This football season is strange. But everything revolves around that position, the quarterback position, how good that quarterback is. I mean, on Saturday night, I somehow got hooked on the Fresno State Bulldogs because, they represent the Central Valley of California. And there was Jake Haener, right? The quarterback got creamed. Looks like a high sprain. I hope it's all just a high sprain and he comes back. But if he's out for the season, the Fresno State Bulldogs aren't half as interesting as they were when Haener was well. Quarterback play. It's all about the quarterback play. Kyler Murray, Arizona Cardinals. What a great comeback against the Raiders, who I like David Carr and the Raiders. They were ahead comfortably. They thought Murray and the Cardinals were dead. But Murray came back. Didn't give up. Tied the game, went in overtime. A defensive fumble recovery put the Arizona Cardinals ahead. They win the game. Quarterback play got them back in the game. And then finally, Asian American, Tua Tagovailoa from Alabama. You know, if you've ever seen Tua play in college, he's from, I believe, St. Louis High. He's from Hawaii. St. Louis High, all those great quarterbacks, right? I think he was from St. Louis High in Hawaii, in Honolulu. So Tua having a hard time, bad play calling, last couple of years. He comes up this year, make or break. Has a good quarterback, a good coach, an offensive coach. He's got two great wide receivers. Waddle, who played at Alabama, and also Tyreek Hill from Kansas City. He used to be the wide receiver of Patrick Mahomes. And my God, Tua just exploded. Six touchdowns, over 450 yards. I mean, he's playing like he was playing in the South and for Alabama again. Like all those games before his injury, when he just would never quit. Now, a lot of people don't like Tua. I love Tua. I love that he's an Asian American quarterback. And, I don't root for the Miami Dolphins except for Tua. But when they're right, once again, it's all about quarterback play. And Tua had a game yesterday. So much for sports. Oh, I should mention the Giants, because when the football was over, God, wouldn't you know the Giants were still playing? They played a late game at Oracle Park. They were still on television on ESPN, and it was boring. Went into after extra innings. They didn't give up, but they just barely lost 4-3 to the Dodgers again, which is painful. Thing about the Giants is that they're good, but they're a team that everything has to line up right. They're a team where you do not get the magic unless all the planets are just right. And that's no way to win a championship in any kind of professional sports. So, Dodgers, they just have too many good players, too many great players. With the Giants have players who last year they were hitting home runs. This year, their players hit long foul balls that would be home runs if they were fair, but they're just foul by a couple feet. Or they hit long fly balls that would be home runs in other parks, like they would have been yesterday. They would have won yesterday if Jock Peterson had hit a fly ball that would have been a home run in 17 ballparks. But they're playing in San Francisco in 2022. And they're just not getting the breaks. Look, you play enough games, it all evens out. That's what they say. That's why they play all the games they do in baseball. Large numbers, large data pools. Eventually, your true talents will emerge because we have the experience, the large set of plays and at-bats. This is true. This is real. It's heartbreaking when you're a fan, because when you're a fan, You just want to win every time. But you can see why the Giants this year were not built for October. They're not going to make it to October. So, if you're a San Francisco fan, you wait for basketball season to start up, and you cross your fingers, and you root for Jimmy Garoppolo and the 49ers. All right, that's it. That's it. That's it for our show today. Hey, look, I woke up with the Queen. I woke up for the Queen this time. I'm a little groggy. I'm not groggy. It was early. And like I said, all I got was, my God, there are a lot of Beefeater hats. Those guards caps. They're bearskin. They don't need the bearskin. Anyway, read my column on Henry Fuhrmann, on the ALDEF blog, aaldef.org/blog, ALDEF, the Asian American Legal Defense and Education Fund, aldef.org/blog. Our show, subtitled WDAAT, What Does an Asian American Think? Emil Will's Takeout, my takes on all things considerable. You can hear it on Twitter at Emil Amok, on YouTube, Emil Guillermo channel, Facebook, fb.com, Facebook Watch, Facebook Live. Just go to fb.com/EmilGuillermo.media and you can watch the shows. Or on amok.com, amok.com. You can catch the replay of the live. And so, regular viewers of this program or listeners, some people prefer to listen. Just take your phone and like put it on, amok.com or put it on YouTube or press. Oh, it's like radio. It's like talk radio. Only he's talking about Asian American things and regular things. Regular listeners know I like to meditate because it assures that I don't overreact. And I like this loving kindness meditation because it puts it on you to go past the shame, go past the doubt, self-worth, the lack of self-worth, and to love oneself. Be kind to oneself. And you do it simply. You be kind to yourself by first showing love to others. And what do you know? The love you show comes back in return. It happens. And so, as I wish for me, I wish for you. May you be safe. May you be happy. May you be healthy. And may you live with ease. Emil Guillermo here. Back again tomorrow, 2 p.m. Pacific. Live. Till then, mahal, kita.